Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. If you are new here, please hit that subscribe button as well as the thumbs up button and leave a comment below. If you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple, or Google, please leave a 5-star rating and review. It supports the podcast and it doesn't cost you anything. Well, folks, it was a big day for the crypto market. Lots of news to cover. Of course, the big one is Coinbase getting a Wells notice from the SEC. But let's talk about the price because today the Fed gave their update. They raised rates by 25 basis points, which was what the majority of people were expecting. And, it could have been 50 basis points, but we know the Fed is trying to be careful here because while they have to fight inflation, they can't further break the banking system. As we've been seeing, regional banks have been collapsing and the Fed has had to bail them out. So Bitcoin did have a pullback here. And you can see on the chart here, it's kind of like a normal pullback, nothing too crazy, because look at the previous pullback before the pump we had last week, right? It's about moving up and then pullbacks and building support levels and then moving up to the next price point. So in a way, that's good. We want Bitcoin to build support levels here as it continues its retracement, because if you look at the weekly chart, look at the massive green candle that, happened here, and maybe we chop around 28,000 for the next week and a half or 2 weeks, and then Bitcoin does its next move up, and of course the altcoins follow. And another data point that confirms the bullishness for assets in crypto is the DXY, the dollar currency index, is crashing. So it's not like the dollar index is pumping and then assets are pulling back. So when you look at all these things holistically, I'm still bullish. Some people started getting bearish, but it's like what the Fed said was actually dovish. They came out and said 25 basis points. Jerome Powell hinted towards we may not need to raise rates in the future. So looking like they're going to pause very soon. And that's, of course, bullish for the market. So great news, in my opinion. Some people, once again, are reading this bearish. I think it's bullish. Now, let's jump into the big news, my friends. For a long time on this podcast, through my own opinions and interviewing different people, we've talked about the attack on Ripple, and a lawsuit against Ripple from the SEC was an attack against crypto. And look how things have escalated since then. The SEC is going after everything. I've said it time and time again. Everything is on the table with the exception of Bitcoin. And eventually they may get to Bitcoin, because notice they haven't approved a Bitcoin spot ETF, right? Why do you think that is? They want to roadblock and slow down crypto. As always, Gary Gensler is working for the incumbents. It's clear as day. It's not a conspiracy theory. We see he is a Goldman Sachs guy. We see who he's meeting with, and you see his language and versus what it was at MIT when he was teaching about crypto, and he talked about the incumbents getting disrupted and they're going to want a share of the pie and so forth. And now he's doing, their bidding here. So Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong tweeted out today, Coinbase received a Wells notice from the SEC focused on staking and asset listings. A Wells notice typically precedes an enforcement action. So it looks like Coinbase is about to get sued, my friends. He says 2 years ago, the SEC reviewed our business in detail and approved Coinbase to go public. Our S1 clearly explained our asset listing process and included 57 references to staking. Coinbase runs a rigorous asset review process and has rejected more than 90% of assets that have applied to be listed on the platform. He continues saying, while we understand that this is all part of the journey to reforming our financial system, we are right on the law, confident in the facts, and welcome the opportunity for Coinbase and by extension, the broader crypto community to get before court. So one could argue, Coinbase, where were you when Ripple was getting sued? Now, we know the folks at Coinbase did file an amicus brief on behalf of Ripple, but I felt that was late. I felt the industry really waited too long to rally behind Ripple. And look, I just recently interviewed Paul Grewal of Ripple. He's the chief legal officer. And, we had some long discussions about Coinbase's process and so forth. And now, Coinbase is getting hit. And we know Gary Gensler wants his pound of flesh from Coinbase. Brian says, we are proud to stand up for our customers and the industry in these moments. Going forward, the legal process will provide an open and public forum before an unbiased body where we will be able to make clear for all to see that the SEC simply has not been fair, reasonable, or even demonstrated a seriousness of purpose when it comes to the engagement on digital assets. In the meantime, Coinbase will continue to do what we do best: build the most trusted products and services in order to advance our purpose of updating the financial system and creating more economic freedom in the world. He says here, we're excited to work with all governments and regulators around the world and who are focused on putting in place clear rules to regulate the crypto industry. So folks, Coinbase has now have to go on the offensive. And I've been saying it for a long time, even brought it up to Paul Grewal at Coinbase, that why doesn't Coinbase bring a coalition together and fight the SEC and sue them? I think we have to go on the offensive, but he was kind of saying that's like a last resort thing. But I think if all these crypto companies come together and sue the SEC, it would have the SEC staff and Gary Genser's head spinning, right? And imagine the attention this would draw from Congress and government and get other government agencies. It will make the SEC look bad if an entire industry is suing you, right, for clarity. So the good thing, though, here, Coinbase, they have the money, just like Ripple, I should say. They have the resources to fight. So expect a big legal battle here between the SEC and Coinbase. Paul Grewal, once again, who I interviewed, he also shared his thoughts on it. It's very similar to what Brian Armstrong had to say, so I'm not going to read through that. And I tweeted out regarding this. I said, remember, folks, corrupt regulator Gary Gensler had Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX officials in his office multiple times and was about to make them a monopoly despite the massive fraud that was happening at FTX. The SEC greenlighted Coinbase going public and is now attacking them. So this is what we're dealing with here, guys. And remember, it's not just, okay, you may say, hey, Tony, you're biased because you're into crypto and you're calling Gary Gensler corrupt and so forth. It's not just me. It's the judges in these cases. What did the judge in the Ripple lawsuit call the SEC officials? Hypocrites on the Bill Hinman situation, right? Also, the recent Voyager Binance US acquisition bankruptcy situation, the judge excoriated the SEC officials, right? Saying there's no clarity. You guys haven't provided any clarity. You just want to come in and mess things up and not allow these bankruptcy proceedings to continue. So they're getting called out by judges who don't have anything to do with crypto. So this is what we're dealing with. And I'm hoping Congress can act because Gary Gensler is out of control. Here, the SEC also went after Justin Sun. Well, you know what? Let me leave that news for later. I'll share what Jeremy Hogan had to say about the Coinbase situation. He said the SEC is not an independent agency making rules based on the law, but a political enforcement arm of the administration and its views. Only the courts can save us now. He's absolutely right. We got to win in court. This is why I've been saying nonstop. We need Ripple to win this lawsuit. There's so many implications here, guys, because remember, fair notice, the corruption with Bill Hinman, there's many layers to the Ripple lawsuit, and we need a win so that these crypto companies can be able to fight back, and win would put a lot of holes in Gary Gensler's whole enforcement actions and expose him and the SEC and their hypocrisy, right, guys? Here, Mike Dudas, he tweeted out, SEC in April of 2021, go right ahead and issue stock to the American public, which he's referencing Coinbase. We approve Coin's business lines and disclosures. SEC in March of 2023, we are suing you, Coinbase, for the exact business lines and disclosures we approved prior to your listing of U.S. shares. And then Craig DeWitt, he was formerly at Ripple. He actually made a very interesting statement here. He said, with the Coinbase wells from the with the Coinbase wells notice from the SEC and the chance of a big Ripple court win, XRP could become one of very few assets available for trading in the U.S. And we also got a statement here from Stuart Alderati, who's general counsel at Ripple. He said, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." So talking about Coinbase and Ripple, they got to team up. They got to fight. That's the only way. I've been saying it. I've been tweeting about it, beating the drum. I asked Paul Grewal about it. Form the coalition and sue the hell out of the SEC. That's the way to do it. Attorney John Deaton said, when you read this coupled, he's talking about Paul Grewal's statements, with the conduct of the SEC in the Ripple case, must come to the conclusion that the SEC as an institution is a complete and utter disgrace. I'm not surprised, considering 9 months ago I said the SEC would do this, but I am angered and saddened. So John's been talking about this, that he expects an enforcement action against an exchange, and the SEC is going after Coinbase. And as you can imagine, the way they've been doing it's very sneaky with other lawsuits. They don't prove that an asset is a security, but it'll sneak it into a lawsuit. It'll say, Coinbase, you're doing this, but and these assets here are securities, and you're whatever it is, but they don't actually go through the details of why those assets are securities. So it's a workaround to try to paint a picture that a lot of these assets are securities without going through the due process for each of them. This is Gary Gensler we're dealing with here, guys. And now, the SEC also charged crypto entrepreneur Justin Sun and 3 of his wholly owned companies for the unregistered offer and sale of crypto asset securities Tronix and BitTorrent. They said here, in connection with the charges against Sun, we also charged 8 celebrities for illegally touting Sun's crypto asset securities. So they're going after everything, folks. Now, I'm not a big fan of Justin Sun. I don't know what he is doing with Tron and BitTorrent and so forth. So we'll see what happens here. But one thing's for sure, the SEC has not put out the guidelines as to what is a security and what's not, and what are the updated rules for digital assets and crypto and tokens, which are in distributed ledgers and blockchains across the globe. So it's tough out there, my friends. And this is why I've been encouraging you guys, as the market moves, be sure you take profits off the table, because we don't know what's going to happen later this year and who's going to get hit. So we want to make sure we're taking profits. I'm not telling you what to do with your crypto. I'm just sharing, investment principles. It's up to you to do your own research. And I'm not saying crypto's dead. I'm just saying in the short term, we may face some very rough seas, right? It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride. So take your profits off the table where you can. Now, the White House takes aim at crypto in a scathing economic report. The report, authored by the White House Council of Economic Advisors, laid out a number of issues seen with the digital asset ecosystem. So essentially, it's similar to the language we've seen and heard from before. Crypto is bad, digital assets are bad, yada, yada. Well, the good thing is that Ron Hammond of the Blockchain Association, who's a frequent guest on this podcast, he weighed in on it, and it kind of put my mind at ease. He said the White House's CEA report reads like it was written by a staff who largely gained their knowledge of crypto through 2022 headlines, because that's what it is. This document mostly is for messaging, not policy. So make sure that you keep that in the back of your mind. It's not policy. This is not law or anything like that. It's just messaging. He said, I'd argue most Democrats in Congress are in the opposite camp on this. So there are, I think, more pro-crypto Democrats than there are those who are anti-crypto. And we know there's a good amount of Republicans who are on board with crypto. He said, but I'd also argue the camp of crypto skeptics in the administration clearly have the pen in this report. Why? Largely FTX and political toxicity created with the crypto. Politically, though, this is an aggressive stance, and it's hard to see any policy benefit from this take. So while they're putting out this lingo, there's not any law to ban. There's not any law to stop anything. So they're doing this very, half-assed, right? They're not giving out the clear guidelines, but they're using, like the pit bull of Gary Gensler to go after companies and shake them down, and these one-off enforcements, but there's no clear guidance, there's no law. And that's what we're dealing with here. It really sucks for entrepreneurs and innovators and investors in the crypto industry here in the United States. But we know what the plan here is, guys. Slow it down for the incumbents. That's what this is. Because it was really a threat, right? They would outright ban it. And you wouldn't see Fidelity and BlackRock and BNY Mellon and all these big institutions still building and launching services. You wouldn't see that. Remember, these big companies have a lot to lose, and risk mitigation is a big part of that, right? They don't want to lose money. They want to make money. So it's a bit of, okay, they're saying all this, but watch what they do. And yes, we have a problem with Gary Gensler, and we got to keep fighting. Now, in a big juxtaposition of the U.S. versus other countries, EU banking authority to hire crypto experts as it prepares for the MiCA law. The Paris-based agency will regulate large stablecoins and make rules under the landmark licensing legislation. So they're putting out regulatory clarity. They're putting out what is and is good and what's not good and so forth. And this is what we need in the United States. We don't have that. We don't have stablecoin regulations. We don't know what's a security, what's not a security. We don't know what what's going to happen with ETFs, spot ETFs and so forth. It's a mess. So guys, what do you think about this news? I know it's not great news, but this is why, I've been making the call on this podcast for you all to go contact your representatives, email, write, call, make content, tweet, do what you got to do. Everybody's on Twitter now, right? All the politicians, all the regulators, Gary Gensler's on Twitter. So you got to use social media to your advantage, guys. And we got to drum up a lot of noise so Congress acts, because you see here, they're going after everything. Even I'm surprised they're going after Coinbase, being that it's a publicly traded company, but it looks like they're going for the head of the snake here. Because it's the largest U.S. exchange. And boy, if they're able to, my hope is that Coinbase fights. And I think they will. They're not going to settle like Kraken did. I wish Kraken fought. But man, Brian Armstrong, if you're listening to this, form the coalition and sue the SEC. Tie them up. At least tie them up. Right now, Gary's twiddling his thumbs. He has nothing to do because he's got his staff going on the offensive while we keep playing defense, but we got to go on the offensive. We got to get him busy and scratching his head like, oh no, we're getting sued by all these companies. It's going to be bad PR for him and a lot of pressure from other government agencies and his critics. So I hope the Coinbase does this and forms a coalition. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you all later.